In a world of knee-jerk personality politics where us lot get drowned out by the most powerful, most angry or most offended, this is a show which gets you back in the debate. We'll give you the arguments on both sides of an issue and we'll be asking you to vote live too during the show. Plus, we'll also be showing you how you can get your voice heard in today's noisy world. We'll also be saying no to partisan politics and going after the cold, hard facts, however uncomfortable they might actually be. So, with an election just weeks away, is this election actually a rerun of the Brexit referendum? And should you be voting for that and not parties this time? Should health chiefs have kept their mouths shut over the NHS? Or were they right to accuse politicians of weaponising our health service? And what's the reality of taxing the rich more? Should the next government give tax cuts rather than tax rises? This is the Midson Project. I'm Richard Midson. I'm a former news editor, journalist and political comms person, and I'm on a mission to repair democracy. Well, at least do my bit to help. So over the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be discussing all this with my guests tonight, and I'll be getting their opinions. But I also want to hear what your thoughts are too, and you can make your comments on YouTube. The link is on the website, but there's also one important difference with this show, remember. We're after the facts here. This is not about a partisan slanging match tonight. If you want to make a point, please do, and back it up with some evidence as well. You'll find the rules on the website at themidsonproject.com/rules. Just head to the website and you'll see a link at the top of the page there. A couple of bits of housekeeping before we start as well. Thank you very much for all the support you've given on the first couple of test shows that we've done. This is the third and hopefully the final test show where we're trying it literally live tonight. And if all goes well today, I hope we can go fully live from the next show with the proper series and get more guests on as well. Also, with this being a test show, we have just one guest again, but I really want to get different points of view on the show. So make sure you sign up to join our bank of guests to be invited on in future. Or if you know someone else who should be on, give them the link to the website and ask them to send their details too. So, on December the 12th, Britain will go to the polls. The election is happening earlier than planned, and it's hard to argue that this is happening for any other reason other than that Parliament has reached an impasse over Brexit. When you look at the options, the Conservatives support a Brexit deal. The Brexit Party want a clean break. The Lib Dems want to stop Brexit, and Labour say they will renegotiate a better deal and have a referendum on that, or you could choose to stay in. But an election also means a new government. It's not just a referendum, isn't it? Which will need to manage a huge variety of other issues for the next 5 years. On both sides of the Brexit debate, we have talk of electoral pacts and tactical voting designed to either lead to Brexit or stop it. So is this just a rerun of the referendum? And should you vote for the party which will deliver the Brexit result you want, whatever else they claim they will do? I'm delighted to bring in my guest again today, who is once again Luke Springthorpe. Thank you very much for joining us again, Luke, this evening. He's a man who's been heavily involved with the youth side of the Conservative Party for many years, and now is a director of Conservative Progress, which trains Conservative activists. And don't forget, you can make points and ask questions to Luke during the show on YouTube, and you can find all the details on the website at themidsonproject.com. Luke, I've got to ask you first of all, what was your first thought when you heard that there was going to be an election? Were you surprised at all?
Well, no, I wasn't surprised at all in the sense that the arithmetic meant it was inevitable fairly quickly. To be honest, I think it was inevitable that this was going to be a short-lived parliament after Theresa May's 2017 election, because the nature of the coalition meant obviously that the DUP held the real balance of power, and especially when the Brexit issue came to the business end of things, I think it was unfortunately inevitable that an election.
So no big surprise. Do you think Conservative activists were looking forward to it or excited? Did they want to get on with it? Or, I mean, it must have been mixed feelings within your party.
It's mixed feelings in the sense I don't think anyone really wants to do an election, having had one in 2017. Obviously a lot of people in the Conservative Party were involved in the referendum campaign in 2016.
Yeah.
2015, so it really has, it's kind of electoral fatigue, both for activists and for the electorate, I think, but at the end of the day, it's all well and good talking about the other issues in politics at the moment, but I think until Brexit gets resolved, there's nothing else that's going to get done in the country.
Yeah.
I think we have to have a government that has a clear vision and has actually got a mandate now.
And gets on with it. It's interesting. We're getting a comment actually already from Rob saying, I completely agree. It's amazing a minority government lasted as long as it did, in fairness. But let's look at this question we're asking, though. Is this just a rerun of the referendum, or should people be thinking about parties? Because whichever party you vote for is going to have a big impact on what happens with Brexit, isn't it? What's your thoughts on this? And feel free to chip in with any thoughts you've got as well.
Yeah, but I guess it's maybe... I think the argument that the Liberal Democrats would make is what is different from the referendum is maybe that people now have a clearer idea of what Brexit means and what leaving the EU entails. So it's, I think it's a classic, campaign in poetry and govern in prose. So I think you had colourful language from both sides in the referendum campaign, and obviously when no one has to deliver at the time of the campaign, you kind of get away with it. Whereas now I think actually, their argument is that we're further down the line. We've had 3 years now. The withdrawal agreement presents what Brexit is really, that there are trade-offs, that we're going to lose access on certain things.
But do you think people should be approaching this? When I walk up, when everyone who's watching this now walks up to that ballot box, what should be the focus? The result we want to get from Brexit, or should we be thinking about the bigger picture?
Well, I mean, this really it's a tricky question because, as I said earlier, I think the unfortunate reality is that nothing else happens until Brexit gets done. It's just taking up so much parliamentary time. And unfortunately, I mean, this is maybe my partisan hats and colours show themselves, but I think the Conservatives are the only party that is actually standing that has a clear way forward in the next few months, whereas I think Labour's position is just bizarre. It's kind of, let's hope that the EU will renegotiate a third deal, and then we'll come back and we'll campaign against that deal and campaign to remain in the second referendum in 6 months' time.
Right. But let's look at it not so much as a party thing. Also, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we understand there is a bit of a sound issue on there tonight. It's very much an experiment, this, so we're trying out to see what we can get working tonight. But thank you for the comment. I've noted that. We will keep working on that as well. Some interesting comments coming in as well. Actually, Rob also saying, Luke, you're being very fair about this. So he's a Lib Dem activist. And interestingly, on the doorstep, most people have other issues at the top of their mind, except hardcore Brexiters, is what he's saying. So he's obviously from a Lib Dem perspective.
Well, I think this is, I'm not disputing that people have other issues on their minds, but all I'm saying is I just think Parliament is going to find it so hard to A, focus on anything else other than Brexit, and B, to find the parliamentary time to debate anything other than Brexit until the issue has been resolved. And I think that's why I just find it immensely frustrating that we've had these supposed to leave in March, and the fact that we're still here debating it again and having to go to the election. Rob's right in that regard. Like the NHS, that there are issues that need resolving there, and reform of various areas. So I completely understand that the public want the debate to move on.
Do you think it is going to be a fair reflection, though? If we're saying that this is basically a rerun of the referendum, Boris is sending out emails saying instead of getting Brexit done and getting on with our priorities, Parliament spent 3 years arguing. That's why we have to get this done. The Lib Dems are saying we've got to stop Brexit. We've got these different opinions being pushed out there. But if you've got, in your case, a Conservative voter who's going to the ballot box, but they were a Remainer, are they going to actually vote Lib Dem or Labour to get a different result? So that's the balance, isn't it? Is this just a rerun or not?
Well, no. I personally, I think I know a fair few Remainers, certainly on the Conservative side, who are of the view that, well, two things. One is that democracy has to be respected, and that whatever you think, the democratic implications of overturning the result are going to be, A, inflict damage on democracy, and B, actually, that there's going to be I mean, we're already seeing politics is getting incredibly unpleasant. And what happens if you keep prodding at this and you overturn the result that happened 3 years ago and still hasn't been implemented? And I think you have to be very careful with that, to be honest.
In fact, it's interesting. Jeff has just said, actually, and also, I don't know whether you can hear Luke better now. Please do let me know if you can, because I've just made a couple of settings changes. But Jeff made an interesting point that this whole election actually kind of almost sums up the Brexit debate in itself, is that we've got the complexity of, well, how do you vote now? Because it's been such a difficult issue to resolve without, well, harming the country, which is one of the reasons why it hasn't happened, this whole difficult debate, isn't it? But let us know, what do you think of the conversation so far? Thank you very much for the points that you have made so far. You can, of course, vote on the website, themidsonproject.com/episode 3. I've put a poll up there, and you can also make comments in the future as well if you like. You can have a look at the or add a hashtag on Twitter for Midson Project and for episode 3. The question, as I say, is it a rerun of the referendum? And so you should vote depending on the Brexit result you want, or should you treat this like any other election? Let's move on to the next topic today. If I can actually get the system to work. 2 moments. There we go. The next one. Politicians have been told not to weaponise the NHS during the general election campaign. Carrie McEwen, the chairwoman of the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, which represents more than 200,000 UK doctors, says they shouldn't use the NHS as vote bait by making even grander promises than each other. She also claimed doctors are afraid that the two main parties will tell outright lies about the NHS during the election campaign and urged parties to keep the NHS out of the election altogether. So should the NHS be part of the election? Yes or no? That's the question I'm asking you tonight. You can vote on the website, as I say. Let's bring in Luke. And don't forget to add your points too on YouTube. Thank you very much. I can see those comments coming in all the time. Luke, what's your thoughts about this? Should the NHS be part of the election debate?
Wow. No, I think there's always a fair debate. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we spend £135 billion on the NHS a year. So it is, I think, after the welfare budget, or perhaps even larger than it is the single largest item of public spending, and obviously hugely important to people's lives, actually. And so I think it's absolutely fair that it is a big part of an election debate. I'd be really surprised if it wasn't. But I think, yeah, they are right. There's a responsibility for, I just think the problem with the NHS is it's always impossible to have a rational debate around the healthcare system, because I think especially in the Labour Party, there's so much hysteria wrapped around all of it a lot of the time. And we saw it very early on in the election campaign. I think talk that the Conservatives were going to sell off the NHS, and we hear this every single election. I think I made the point the other day that the Conservatives have been in power for 44 of the 71 years that the NHS has existed. So actually, in reality, if you think the NHS is okay, actually,
I think the problem you're getting and okay, this was something, we discussed in a previous show. Also, just want to say thank you to Rob as well, who just said that surely it has to be part of the election, as you've just said there as well. It is a major national institution and affects us all. Talking about the BBC, I mean, they were saying that the claim from Boris Johnson was that the government's pledged, just trying to look at it here, billions of pounds for hospital projects across England. But while the plans included 2.7 billion investment for 6 hospitals over 5 years, a further 34 hospitals will share only an initial 100 million to start developing future projects, but not delivering on it. So, obviously this is the BBC's interpretation of it, but the problem here is that whether this has just become I'll build one more hospital than you, and it just becomes almost this arms race with no actual real facts or real valuable content being put forward.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of almost where the NHS debate, it's where I worry about it sometimes, is because it's almost become this arms race, I think, of just saying how much money the government will throw at it. And
that's
look,
what I
I
mean,
think
yeah.
Public money absolutely needs to be spent on it. But,
yeah.
I remember back in, I think it was 2005 when Michael Howard was talking about a concept called the patient passport. And the idea behind that was that if you wanted to go and seek private treatment, that the government would cover the cost of that up to the level that the NHS would. but you would have to pay the difference, essentially. So essentially, you're talking about a policy that would take patients out of the NHS, free up NHS resources at no extra cost to the taxpayer. Now, this was shot down as privatisation through the back door, selling, and actually, I think the problem is that you can't have this debate about saying, how do we deal with growing demand for health? Do we just, because at the end of the day, it feels like, as I say, we're spending £135 billion on it now. That budget it was the only item of ring-fence spending that any Liberal Democrat activist will know through the coalition years. We protected
the thing is, though, we're talking about it, whether we're delivering facts here. And in fact, a comment's just come in on the feed as well. We're saying that should manifestos, and this is presumably all manifestos, be costed or fact-checked? Now, one of the problems, as you were just saying there, is the interpretation of the figures as well. But should that maybe be something? Should all manifestos be fact-checked before they're put out there?
Oh, I definitely think so. At the end of the day, if you're pledging to spend vast sums of public money, then I think absolutely it should be almost a public service. But then again, I know Labour, I think there was a bit of a furore the last couple of days because I think the civil service were asked to go through Labour's spending pledges.
Right.
And I think John McDonnell was furious at that. So you've got to wonder what they're
okay. But I mean, keeping away from the parties, what we're saying here is that I'm not surprised we saw mentions of the Brexit bus as well on that one. But let's stick with the fact checking. I mean, it's interesting. Jeff's saying here fact checking is so crucial. People should fact check everything that politicians say. Jeff is making a partisan point there about Boris Johnson, but I think overall it could be interesting if manifestos are actually checked. But I think there's no doubt though that the NHS really has to be part of the election, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. As I say, I mean, I'd find it strange if it wasn't.
Yeah. So from what you've heard over the last few minutes, thank you very much for your comments. What do you think? Whether you're following live or in the future, you know where to go now, themidsonproject.com/episode 3, and you can vote there, or you can tweet as well using the hashtag #MidsonProject and #episode 3. And if you want to find out more about the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, they have a Twitter feed as well, and that's at AOMRC. I'll spell that again. It's AOMRC if you want to find out more about them. Right, topic 3 for tonight. Let's see if we can move on to this one. My system lets me down once again. Right, here we go. It's one of the cliches, isn't it, of political parties, and that is that the rich are too rich and they should give their money to the poor. That's the attitude on the left, while the right supposedly say the rich should get tax breaks because they contribute more to the economy and should be providing more. Once again, the theme of rich or poor is being highlighted in the election this year. So what are the facts on this? Should the new government, this is a question I'm asking you, should the new government that's elected after December the 12th tax the rich more or less? Luke, you're from the right politically on this one, but what do you think about this?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's a balancing act, isn't it? The reality is that the top 1% pay 27% of all income tax receipts in the UK at the moment. And the reality is a lot of these people, if we're being honest, have kind of capital assets and businesses that would actually be welcomed across the world. So you have to be careful, because if these people suddenly start thinking, well, the UK is a climate that punishes me for earning more. And I think a lot of these people don't mind paying a fair amount of tax. But actually, if you start kind of tipping it over to a level where they think, you know what, I'm working so much harder this year and not seeing any rewards from that, then let's be honest, they're going to go elsewhere.
So is this the problem that actually the super rich can move so easily? And it's a bit almost like the internet companies, where we're seeing them, or in the past, are very much basing in the lowest tax areas, weren't they? So can we actually...
The Republic of Ireland has done incredibly well out of this. And so I think you look at these jurisdictions that have cut their corporation tax, and I know Luxembourg is another jurisdiction that, these European Union countries that have done incredibly well out of.
So should there be more sort of is it possible that there could be more international cooperation to, in quotes, stop rich people that maybe are being taxed more from moving abroad and hiding from that? It's perhaps a perspective that would come from the left.
The only way you'd ever get that is if you had international tax harmonisation, and that's such a utopian vision of where we are now. I think, if anything, the direction of everything is moving in more of a nationalistic direction, where, whether you think that's right or wrong, that is the political reality of the world as we face it. And look, certainly after Brexit, I think we're going to be in a situation where we have to be a competitive economy that's able to attract the brightest, the best, both in terms of people.
So in a way, what you're saying is that whether we like it or not, you can dream of this idea of taxing the rich more, but in fact, you almost can't.
Well, I mean, you can, but I think what we've typically seen actually is that you start doing that, especially with things like corporation tax, is actually your receipts start to decline. We've actually seen a trend in the last few years, I believe, where tax receipts from corporation tax have increased despite being cut. So I think, to my mind, the results speak for themselves.
Let's have a look at some of the comments. What have we got there from Andrew saying? What have we got there? How much more exit of those with money, companies, individuals does the UK want? The country is bleeding. Yeah. So the danger of people moving out. Also, Rob making an interesting point about the fact that the tax issue has actually become a bit of an extreme issue, with the Conservatives and Labour seeming to be there isn't really a push for a moderate policy in between. It seems to be just polarising once again on something like this.
This is what I say. I think the middle ground is a balancing act. Actually, I was very grateful that, because in the coalition years, I remember the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives wanted to increase the inheritance tax threshold. And I think the trade-off for the coalition was that we increased the nil rate ban for the personal allowance. And actually, that's lifted millions of people out of paying income tax. And I think that's when you can actually use tax cuts in a kind of way that people see it's not just this thing for the rich. Actually, we've lifted millions of people out of paying income tax altogether, and put more money in people's pockets. So I don't think tax cuts needs to be this kind of dirty concept that is just for the people at the very top. Actually, it can be something that benefits everyone.
Right. So what do you think from what you've heard once again over the last few minutes? What do you think? Go and vote on the midsonproject.com/episode 3. And as I say, you can comment on Twitter as well. Let's just have a quick look. What other comments have we got coming in? Rob saying, surely taking the level playing field. What's that? Out of the withdrawal agreement and into the political declaration harms the argument. It's removed the International Tax Corporation. Jeff also saying that he thinks that nationalism is losing popularity in Europe and is on a downturn, and saying that Brexit could have scared people on that as well. Jeff also, clearly from a Lib Dem perspective here, saying that the Lib Dems came up with a personal tax allowance, but I think what we're saying here is that it's trying to come up with that. Yeah. You're agreeing with that one, with the moderate policy. So thank you very much for those issues so far today. Do keep your comments coming in. In a moment, we'll be giving you tips on how you can get your voice heard over the noise in our campaign masterclass. But first, let's have a quick look back at some of last week's questions, if I can get that to work once again. Right, here we go. This was the first question we had last week, and feel free to make a comment on here as well, even if you can't vote on this one anymore. The first question we had last week was, are politicians out of touch with the public? This was... are politicians listening to us enough? Should they even be listening to us? You could almost argue in a way with the whole idea of the Brexit referendum being an advisory vote that perhaps politicians shouldn't always listen to us. 62% of you said yes on that one, that they're not listening. Is the BBC biased? This was close, with 57% of you saying yes, in fact. Certainly when we were talking with you, Luke, last week, it was very much a sort of, we weren't quite sure where to go with that one. And has Extinction Rebellion gone too far? 83% of you agreed that the tactics used by the groups taking direct action, so not just Extinction Rebellion, but other groups, have now gone too far. What do you think? Now, in a world of angry politics, how can you get your voice heard over the noise? So if you've been sitting there during the show thinking, how can I get involved in one of these issues or another issue that's close to your heart? This is a show that wants to help you do that too. The guests we have on this show will mostly have some sort of campaigning experience, and we're asking them to share at least one tip per show to help you get heard. Now, as a former journalist, I'm also sharing my tips too. So before I get to Luke, let me share my tip this week. And it's a question that I was asked quite a lot, and that is, should you send a press release still? Is it a thing to do in modern times? Well, I was talking to a very senior BBC journalist not that long ago, and he said that one of the things that you should really try and do first when you're trying to set up a campaign is to build support online, on Twitter, on Facebook, but somewhere that you can get some social validation, so that when you approach a journalist, you can already say, I've got 1,000 people following you, and they're going to very quickly check who you are. They're going to check your account and see whether you've got any credibility. And if you've got lots of followers, they're going to take you more seriously. So what he was actually saying was, instead of just sending off a press release as a Joe nobody, which you may be when you're starting out, is build up that social media following, get your social validation, and then start approaching the press and point out just how big your issue has become online. That's my one for this week. Luke, what's your tip for this week on how people can get themselves heard?
Well, I think... I'll give two, actually. I think the first one, I'll kind of repeat the one that I said last week, if that's okay. And that's the first is perseverance. I think you'll have to, whether you go through joining a political party or a single issue campaign, you will have to accept that you're not going to get your own way, certainly not at first. It's going to be tough, and you're going to have to stick with it. There'll be people that say you're not up to it, or that you're, talking rubbish, and you have to kind of have the horse blinkers and stick with it, because a lot of the people that get on either with issues or get elected to politics, the thing that they all have in common is that perseverance, and they stick with it. So that would be the first one. And the second is be organised. A lot of it's not just, I think people see the emotional aspect of politics and great speeches and think, a lot of it does come from the heart, but actually a lot of it is about sitting down and mapping what your goals are in very clear terms first, crafting a message around those goals. So what clearly explains to normal people who have had nothing to do with your campaign, be that decision makers or members of the public, in deciding how you're going to articulate that to them and why they should care. And the second is, in terms of that organizational aspect, thinking who you need to be talking to, because obviously, politics can catch so many different stakeholders, as it were. But I think you need to decide very early on whether it's a kind of mass mobilization that you're looking to do. Are you looking to kind of get the public rising up and to what ends? Or are you looking for maybe more of a kind of tailored, soft campaign aimed at getting a decision made your way by, it could be a public health trust or something, or
so being focused, having a clear direction and persistence, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke. Just having a look at a few final comments. What have we got? Jeff has said goodbye to us for now. Thank you very much to Jeff. What's that? Politicians don't listen, but they are hunting for votes, from Andrew, and Rob also saying, from the perspective of the left, the BBC are biased against them. All his friends on the right say the same, so that suggests it's in the middle, which I think is
exactly what we said last week, wasn't it?
We came to last week as well. So thank you very much for that.
It's biased, then maybe it's.
And what was this other comment I saw someone was making, which was saying that getting lots of likes on Facebook was like being rich in Monopoly. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you very much to Luke. Thank you very much to you for giving your comments tonight. It's been a really interesting experiment to do this tonight live, and I think it does show that it can work. There's a few technical issues like the sound at the beginning, so thank you very much for bearing with us on that one. Thank you for adding your comments as well. If you, I think we probably are, with a few more little tweaks, which I can do myself, ready to start this show and this series properly live. So I really want to know what is getting under your collar over the coming weeks. What could you come on and the show and discuss? Tell me on Twitter at the Midson Project, at Midson Project. We're also planning a debate night special on the 19th of November, straight after that debate on TV. And if you want to be a guest on that or know someone who should be on there, I don't want to hear one perspective on this. I want to get as many people on as we can. Don't let your point of view go unheard. So help us get the right people on so everyone gets to hear all the different points of view out there. Message me on Twitter or via the website at themidsonproject.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast as well. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm having a quick look at some of the comments. Looks like it's done really well tonight. Thank you very much, and hope to speak to you again soon.